The desert night was calm, the sky full of stars, and the sand cold under the feet, far away from the noise of Makkah. A man climbed toward the Cave of Hira. He was known among the people as Al-Amin, the honest, the trustworthy. Whenever someone had a problem, they came to him. Whenever someone needed to keep their wealth safe, they trusted him, yet in his heart he carried questions that no one could answer. He often left the busy markets, the gatherings of leaders, and the noise of the city. Instead, he walked alone to the cave, sitting in silence, thinking about life. He watched the stars and asked himself, who created all this? He saw people worshiping idols made of stone. Yet he felt deep inside that this was not the truth. His heart longed for something pure, something higher. Night after night, he returned to the cave, spending hours in prayer and reflection. The people of Makkah did not know what was going on in his heart. To them, he was simply the man who never lied, the man they could trust with their lives. But in silence, his soul was preparing for something greater than anyone could imagine. One special night, the air in the cave felt different. The silence of the desert was heavy. As if waiting for something to happen, he sat quietly, his eyes closed. His heart opened suddenly. A presence filled the cave, stronger than anything he had ever felt. He opened his eyes, and in front of him stood an angel. The cave that was once dark now shone with a light that no lamp could create. His body shook. His heart raced. The angel spoke a single word: read. He looked back in shock. I cannot read, he whispered, trembling. The angel held him tightly and repeated, read once again, he replied, I cannot read. The angel spoke a third time, and this time, words filled his heart. Words that would change the world. Sweat rolled down his face. His chest rose and fell quickly. He had never experienced anything like this. His mind struggled to understand what had just happened. He rushed out of the cave, his steps unsteady, his body trembling. The desert wind touched his face, but nothing could calm his racing heart. Something beyond this world had touched him, something that would never leave him the same. When he reached home, he asked to be covered with a blanket. His voice shook as he said, something powerful came to me. I was afraid for myself. The fear in his heart was real, but so was the light that had entered him. He did not yet know what this moment truly meant. But history had already changed. The message of Allah had begun. This was the night when the journey started. A journey that would carry light into the darkest hearts. A journey that would lift people from worshiping stones to worshiping the one true God. And though he was only one man, with no army, no wealth, and no teacher, he carried a trust that would change the world forever. The silence of the desert had ended, a voice had spoken, and the universe would never be the same again. The desert sun rose over Makkah, yet inside the small house, his heart was still trembling. The night before had changed everything. He sat quietly, wrapped in a blanket, whispering what had happened. His voice shook as he said, an angel came to me. It told me to read. Fear and awe filled his eyes. For he knew this was not a dream. It was real. Those close to him listened carefully, their hearts heavy with concern. They had always known him as calm, patient, and gentle. But now they saw his face pale, his hands trembling. Something powerful had touched him. Something beyond human strength. Days passed. But his heart could not forget the words. When he walked in the streets of Makkah, the same people greeted him with trust. They still called him Al-Amin, the honest, the one who never lied, yet he carried a secret. A message placed deep inside his heart. A message that was not just for him, but for all of humanity. Then one day, the angel came again. This time, the voice was clear. It spoke of the Lord who created man from a clot. It spoke of one God, the only God. The truth that had been hidden under idols was now revealed. His body trembled again, but his soul felt light. He now understood. He was chosen to carry the words of Allah. He was to guide people from darkness to light. But how could one man stand against the whole city of idols? In silence, he returned home. Those near him comforted him, reminding him that Allah would not abandon him. Step by step, his fear turned into strength. His heart now carried peace. Even though the road ahead was filled with danger, soon he began to share the words quietly. He spoke to a few people he trusted most. When they heard him, their hearts opened. They had seen his honesty all their lives. They knew he never lied. So when he said that Allah had sent him, they believed one by one. A small group gathered around him. They did not gather in the open, for the city was not ready to hear. Instead, they met in secret, whispering the new words. They repeated the verses with tears in their eyes, for the words of Allah touched their hearts like nothing else. But even as this small light began to spread, shadows moved in the streets of Makkah. Leaders of the city watched him closely. They heard whispers that he was speaking against their idols. They felt fear that their power was under threat. For if people believed in one God, the idols would fall, and their wealth and pride would be broken. He knew this, yet he did not stop. Every night he remembered the angel's voice. Every day he remembered the weight of the words. This was no ordinary message. It was a trust from Allah. And he would never turn away. The days ahead would not be easy. Whispers would turn into anger. Anger would turn into plots. And plots would turn into trials that would test every believer. But for now, the message had begun. A message that would rise from a cave in the desert to every corner of the earth. And so the man once known only as Al-Amin was now something greater. A prophet of Allah, carrying words that would shine forever. The world did not yet know it, but history had already changed. The path of humanity was no longer the same. The streets of Makkah were filled with noise, the markets busy, and the idols standing tall inside the Kaaba. For generations, people had bowed to these statues. Offering food, gifts, and prayers, they believed the idols could protect them, bring rain, and give wealth. But now, one man stood with a message that shook all of this. He had spoken to a few close people, and their hearts had accepted the truth. They repeated the verses of the Quran. Their eyes filled with tears. They felt peace like never before, as if chains had been broken from their hearts. But faith was not only about peace, it was also about tests. When he finally stood before the people and spoke openly, silence filled the air. He told them there is no God but Allah, the creator of the heavens and the earth. He told them the idols could neither harm nor help. He reminded them that all people are equal before Allah. And he warned them that one day every soul would stand before its Lord. The people stared at him in shock. Some whispered, "How can this man, the one we called Al-Amin, speak against our gods?" Others became angry, their faces red with rage. The leaders of Quraysh, who held power and wealth through the idols, clenched their fists. They saw their control slipping. Their pride breaking, word spread quickly through Makkah. Some laughed, calling him a dreamer. Some turned away, saying he was just making up stories. But there were also hearts that trembled with truth. Among the poor, the weak, and even some respected men, belief began to grow. The leaders could not ignore this. They gathered in secret, whispering among themselves. They said, "If we do not stop him now, he will take our people away from us. He will destroy our gods, and we will be left with nothing." From that day, their anger grew into hatred. They tried to stop the message with words. They called him a magician, a poet, even a madman. But no matter what they said, the Quran touched people's hearts in a way no poetry ever had. The words were too powerful, too deep, too full of truth to be denied. At night, when people thought no one was watching, some of them came quietly to listen. They stood in the darkness, hidden. As he recited the words of Allah, their hearts shook, their eyes filled with tears. But fear kept their tongues silent. They could not admit it in front of others. Yet the message had already entered their souls. His followers, though few, grew stronger. They prayed together in secret, their voices soft, their hearts firm. Every new believer was like a new star in the dark sky of Makkah. And with every star, the leaders felt more threatened. The prophet, however, did not show fear. He knew Allah was with him, even when he walked alone in the streets. Even when people mocked him, his patience never broke. He did not fight them with anger. He fought them with truth and mercy. But the suspense was growing. The leaders were planning. Their whispers became louder, their eyes sharper. They were no longer just angry. They were ready to harm. The people who once called him Al-Amin were now turning into enemies. And those who believed in him were about to face trials they could never have imagined. Still, the message continued to spread. It was like fire hidden under ashes, glowing stronger each day. The words of Allah could not be silenced. No matter how many tried, the call to one God had begun. and Makkah would never be the same again. The days in Makkah were no longer the same. The message of one God had begun to spread, and the hearts of the weak and poor were opening to it. But with every new believer, the anger of the Quraysh leaders grew stronger. They could not accept that their idols were powerless. They could not accept that a single man was challenging their entire way of life. In the narrow streets of Makkah, whispers filled the air. People spoke of secret gatherings where the Prophet recited the Quran. At night, men and women sat quietly, repeating the verses, tears falling from their eyes. They felt strength they had never known before, even though they lived in fear, but the leaders watched closely. They began to punish those who followed him. The rich mocked the poor believers, calling them foolish. Some were beaten in the markets. Others were left hungry. Entire families were forced to choose between their tribe and their faith. The Prophet saw all of this, his heart heavy with pain. He knew his followers were suffering, yet he told them to be patient. He reminded them that Allah was with them, that paradise awaited those who stood firm. He did not promise them gold or safety, but he gave them hope that no enemy could take away. Still, the cruelty of Quraysh grew. They threw dust on him when he prayed. They insulted him in front of the Kaaba. They laughed at the words of Allah, but no matter how they mocked him, he never returned their anger. Instead, he prayed for them. Hoping their hearts would soften in secret, the followers continued to meet. They prayed in hidden places. Away from the eyes of the leaders, one house in particular became a place of gathering. There the Quran was recited, and faith grew stronger in quiet voices. It was as if a small light was burning inside a dark room, unseen by many but powerful and alive, yet danger was everywhere. One believer was dragged across the hot sand, his back burning under the sun. Another was chained and beaten, his cries echoing through the streets. But their lips still whispered, "There is no God but Allah." Their strength became a mystery to those who hurt them. How could they endure such pain yet refuse to let go of this new faith? The Prophet comforted them, his voice calm, his heart full of patience. He told them that every trial brought them closer to Allah. He reminded them of the prophets before him who also faced hardship. His words gave them courage, even when their bodies were weak. The leaders of Quraysh grew desperate. They tried to bribe him with wealth, promising him gold and power. They offered him kingship if only he would stop speaking against their idols. But he refused, his voice firm. "If you place the sun in my right hand and the moon in my left, I will never give up this message." The words shook them, for they saw his determination could not be broken. Still, they plotted in silence. Their anger was no longer just against the message. It was against the man himself. They wanted to silence him forever. But Allah was protecting him. Every attempt they made failed. Every plan turned against them. The suspense in Makkah grew heavier each day. Believers lived with courage, yet also with fear of what tomorrow might bring. Enemies waited for the right moment to strike, but the message continued to spread, unstoppable like a river cutting through rock. And in the middle of this struggle, the Prophet stood with calm patience. Neither fear nor anger could turn him away. His strength was not in armies or wealth. It was in the words of Allah, words that no enemy could silence, words that would echo long after the voices of Quraysh had faded. The city of Makkah had become a place of trials. Believers lived each day with courage, but also with fear. Enemies plotted in the shadows, hoping to silence the Prophet and his message. Yet the words of Allah continued to spread, reaching hearts no one could stop. The Quraysh leaders saw that insults and punishments were not enough. They whispered together, "If we do not end this now, his message will grow, and our idols will fall." They made plans to attack him, to end his life in secret. But Allah was watching, and his protection surrounded the Prophet. One night, as the enemies gathered outside his home, their swords ready, the Prophet prepared for a journey that would change everything. Allah had commanded him to leave Makkah, to travel to a new city where hope and safety awaited. It was not an escape of fear, but a step of strength. For this migration would open a new chapter for the message of Islam. The plan was dangerous. His enemies stood just outside, waiting for him to step out. But Allah caused their eyes to be blinded. He left without them seeing. Walking past them while they stood unaware, it was a moment of divine power, a sign that no enemy could harm him without Allah's will. With his closest companion, he set out into the desert. The journey was long, the nights cold, the days burning with heat. Enemies searched everywhere, offering rewards to whoever captured him. But when they came close, Allah protected him in ways that amazed even the hardest hearts. At the entrance of a cave, he hid as his enemies approached. They searched high and low, their footsteps echoing near the rocks. But when they reached the cave, they saw a spider's web and a bird's nest at the entrance. They thought no one could have entered here. This cave has been untouched for days. And they left, unaware that the Prophet was inside, safe under Allah's protection. Finally, the journey brought him to Medina. The people there welcomed him with joy, their voices rising with chants of peace. For years they had waited for a man of truth, and now he stood among them. They opened their homes, their hearts, and their lives, and from Medina, the message of Islam grew stronger than ever before. The Quraysh leaders heard the news, their anger burning. But no matter what they did, the words of Allah had already spread beyond Makkah. The Prophet now had a community, a place where faith could grow without fear. From this moment on, Islam would no longer be a whisper in the desert. It would become a light for nations, a guide for generations. He continued his mission with mercy and patience. Even those who once raised swords against him later found peace in his words. He forgave enemies who had harmed him, showing kindness when others expected revenge. His character became the greatest proof of his message. And hearts continued to turn toward Allah. The story of one man, alone in a cave, had now become the story of an entire nation. He had no army when he began, no wealth, no power, but he had the truth. And the truth was stronger than any idol. The same words revealed in the Cave of Hira still live in the Quran today. A message of mercy, justice, and guidance for all of humanity. The people of Makkah once laughed, mocked, and tried to silence him. But history remembers him not for their laughter, but for his truth. From the deserts of Arabia, his light spread to every corner of the world, and it continues to shine, guiding millions who repeat the same words. There is no God but Allah, and Muhammad ﷺ is his messenger. The journey that began in silence had now become a voice for all times. The story of the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ was not just the story of a man, it was the story of a message that could never be silenced. A message that still lives, still shines, and still changes lives. From the Cave of Hira to every home where the Quran is recited, the light remains, and it will remain forever.